Well, Butterflies and Dragons was written for the Melos Music second annual concert here in San Francisco, where we're working this week. I've written a fair amount of chamber music, but I've really focused on fairly homogenized ensembles. I have a brass quintet, I have a piano trio that has 2 string players in it and a piano. I've written some mixed chamber music, but this was a real chance for me to explore different timbral possibilities when you're dealing with 2 woodwinds, 2 strings, a piano, and a percussionist. You know, there's a tremendous amount of variety there. Now you can work to make it homogenized and blended, or not, or whatever the case may be. But that alone, knowing that that was going to be the instrumentation for my piece, became a big impetus for what I wanted to do in the composition. So that was sort of the main thrust that got me thinking about the piece, making it something colorful and shining that would allow us to really explore those different possibilities. The title, Butterflies and Dragons, had to do with some of the musical language of the piece. Once I began working on it, I had composed basically in 4 discrete sections. They're all interrelated with material, but they divide into these 4 chunks, and some of them were sort of light and flourishy, like, you know, a bird flying through the air or something like that. And some were a little bit more tenacious. There's definitely some crunch in the piece. There are these moments, you know, where it really digs in a little bit. And the very opening gesture of the piece goes like this. Something like that. And when I heard that, you know, all I could think about was, like, how I wanted that to unfold was like the fluttering of butterfly wings. So I wasn't going for, like, oh, the beautiful, delicate butterflies, but it was more this sort of, this really ripple effect that takes off, you know. And then they have this call and answer going. So that lighthearted kind of rippling mixed with a more tenacious thing gave me Butterflies and Dragons. That's where it came from. Yeah, well, there's a big difference in my mind, and of course that's always been a big challenge for me, is, you know, what makes a good chamber music piece. I have some concepts about what makes a good orchestra piece in mind that are imposed by the limitations of an orchestra. When you have 80 people who have to move together, that determines to a large extent the kinds of gestures that you can effectively use with an ensemble of that size. So because there are some rules already set in place, I've always found orchestral music to be a lot of fun to write, and in a way not as challenging for me. When I'm dealing with chamber music, especially small chamber music, each instrument plays such an important role. You know, every single note they have and their own individual voice within the piece is so exposed that it really, for my money, takes a lot more intricacy and detail to make it compelling and effective, at least in my musical world. The biggest difference I see is that in chamber music, you really have to have very direct, engaging dialogue between instruments. I think the essence of great chamber music is dialogue, is some kind of conversation happening between the instruments. And that was a lot of what I was trying to do in Butterflies and Dragons, is having, you know, a melodic line here, responded to by a melodic line there, and things like that. Whereas sometimes in orchestral music, you can get away with these larger soundscapes, you know, big block chords and sweeping gestures that decay over a long period of time. Chamber music and this kind of instrumentation doesn't obviously lend itself to that same approach. So for me, it's always a challenge to, you know, how can I keep the motion going and make this interesting when there's fewer voices and every note is heard.